Welcome to Trial Talk, insights from experienced New York trial attorney Michael Joseph.
Hello and welcome to Trial Talk with experienced attorney Michael Joseph. With over 20 years of experience in personal injury, commercial litigation, and criminal defense, Michael is committed to social and economic justice. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and today we're going to talk about rideshare accidents. Michael, great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So if I'm an Uber or a Lyft driver and I get injured in a car accident, who pays the medical bills?
Okay, so if you're working for Uber or Lyft and you're transporting people, then under New York liberties law, you're considered an employee, which means you get workers' compensation benefits. It depends if you're transferring people or you're transporting food, because if you're working, for example, for Uber Eats or Chowhound or Seamless or one of these other delivery services, you're actually not considered an employee. You're considered an independent contractor. And if you're considered an independent contractor working for Uber Eats, for example, and you get into a car accident, it defaults back to no-fault benefits, which means you have to apply for no-fault benefits through the car's insurance that's applicable when you're driving. Now, for example, when you're working for Uber Eats, there's certain insurance that covers you while you're only working for Uber Eats, and then there's personal insurance. So it's a little bit of a quagmire, but we have to make sure the no-fault application, which has to be done within 30 days, goes to the right insurance company. So you definitely want to have an experienced rideshare accident attorney on your side when you get into one of these accidents, because the first step is to determine whether you're on the clock or off the clock, if you're on the app or off the app. If you're off the app, actually, it defaults to no-fault benefits. But if you're actually on the app, then you're considered an employee and you have to apply for workers' compensation.
Okay. So it's interesting that it depends on if you actually have people in your car, you're considered an employee.
Well, it's not only if you have people in your car. If you're on the app and even going to transport or pick up a ride, or if you're just dropping a ride off, you're still considered an employee. So it depends on if you're on the app for transporting people versus transporting food. So if you're transporting people under New York's liberty law, you're actually considered an employee.
Okay.
The second you turn the app on, you're an employee. If you're transporting food, however, you're an independent contractor. It's almost like a logic game trying to figure out what benefits you get. But that's
so interesting. I didn't know that.
That's why you need somebody who knows how to do this. Because, for example, no-fault law, you only have 30 days to submit an application. So if you're working for Uber Eats and you think you're an employee and you're submitting a workers' comp application, you may blow the 30 days and be stuck with medical bills.
Yep. If I'm injured in an Uber, Lyft, or rideshare accident, who pays my bills? Like, I'm not like if I have an accident with an Uber driver, then who pays the medical bills?
Okay, if you have an accident with an Uber driver and you're in your own vehicle, New York has what's called a no-fault law. And that means regardless of fault, whether you're at fault, whether the Uber or Lyft driver's at fault, your own medical bills get paid by your own insurance company. And so your medical bills and lost wages get paid by your own insurance company. Now, there's a distinction between medical bills and compensation for pain and suffering. So even though a lot of people say, hey, why am I applying to my own insurance company? I don't want my rates to go up when the other guy's at fault. Well, the reason is New York has what's called a no-fault law. So it doesn't matter who's at fault. Your insurance company, if you're driving your own vehicle and you get into an accident with an Uber or Lyft or some other rideshare company, your insurance company pays your medical bills, and then later on they'll go after the other insurance company to get their money back. And the first step is it goes to your own insurance company to pay your own medical bills and lost wages, but then you can also sue either Uber or you sue Lyft or the other driver if they're at fault and you have personal injuries. So that's compensation for personal injuries. So there's kind of a distinction between the initial who pays medical bills and who pays the lost wages and who's ultimately responsible for compensation for pain and suffering or for an injury.
Okay, and then the third part here, if I'm riding in an Uber and I get injured in an accident, what happens then? Who pays? Can I sue? Like, how does that work?
Okay. Well, if you're a passenger, you have to submit a no-fault application to the insurance company for the vehicle you're in. Now, typically what happens in a bad accident, for example, is you get into an accident, you're a passenger, you get taken to the hospital, and you have no idea who this person is. So what we do is you want to get the accident report, and the accident report will always have the ID of the drivers, the ID of the owner of the company, and it'll have an insurance code at the bottom. So that'll tell us who the insurance company is that's covering and that vehicle that you were in when you were injured, and then we submit an application for no fault benefits to that insurance company. And the insurance company for the vehicle you're in will pay your medical bills and pay your lost wages. Now, in terms of suing, it depends on who's at fault for the accident. For example, even if you're in an Uber or a Lyft vehicle, if you're sitting in the passenger seat and you're rear-ended, well, Uber or Lyft's not responsible. The car that rear-ended you is at fault. So you would sue the car that rear-ended you. So really, we have to, and a lot of times, unless someone stopped at a light, for example, there's usually fault on both sides of or both vehicles involved in the accident. So we have to look at how the accident happened, and you can sue everybody who was at fault at all, or whose carelessness contributed to the accident. Obviously, as a passenger, you're not at fault. You didn't do anything wrong. So we have to look at how the accident happened, who was at fault, was one car speeding, was one car turning, did one car not let the other car in, did one car make an unsafe lane change, and whoever's basically at fault or violated the rules of the road is responsible and can be sued.
Okay. All right. So going back to the food delivery, if I'm an Uber Food or DoorDash or Chowhound or any delivery driver, and I get hit by a car, then who pays the medical bills in that scenario?
Okay, so if you're not transporting people, if you're either transporting food, then it's a little bit of it varies a little bit depending if you're in a car or on a bike or on an e-bike. So, for example, if you're working for Uber Eats or you're working for Seamless and you're transporting food, again, you're an independent contractor. So if you're in your own vehicle, and you get into an accident, the insurance company for the vehicle that you're driving, your own vehicle, is going to pay for your medical bills and your lost wages. Then obviously you can sue the other vehicle who you were involved in the accident with if they were at fault and that caused the accident. Now, in the case of somebody who's on a bike or on e-bike, it's a little bit of a different story. If you're on a bike and you get hit by a car while you're working for, Uber Eats or Seamless or Chowhound or one of the delivery companies, then you're still considered an independent contractor. So it then comes back to basically you're a person on a bike who got hit by a car. So in that case, you would be entitled to no fault benefits from the insurance company for the car that hit you. So you actually have to identify that vehicle's insurance company and make a no fault application to their insurance company. And again, typically what will happen is we'll get the police report, figure out who the owner is, figure out who the insurance company is. And that's one of the services we provide to people who are injured in bike accidents while working for Seamless or Uber Eats or one of the food delivery services. Now, this gets a little even more nuanced because if you're on a e-bike, which I think goes above 30 miles per hour, you're technically considered a motorcycle. And motorcycles are actually exempt from the no-fault laws. So if you're on a motorcycle or an e-bike that goes above a certain speed, and you're making a food delivery and you get hit by a car, in that circumstance, you're an independent contractor, so you're not an employee of the food delivery service. You're not entitled to no fault because you're on technically a motorcycle, even if it's a scooter or an e-bike that just goes over I think 30 miles an hour. In that scenario, it falls back to your own private insurance. So your own private health insurance is going to pay the medical bills. And what happens if you don't have health insurance? In that case, if you have injuries, you go to the hospital, you have to apply for emergency Medicaid. And then Medicaid will generally pick up those bills. But in any scenario, if you're on a bike, an e-bike, or a motorcycle, you can always sue the driver that hit you because New York law requires that drivers exercise due care to avoid hitting people on bikes and e-bikes and motorcycles.
Sure.
You can always sue for pain and suffering. Now, to get even a little further nuance, what makes this interesting, whenever you get no fault, you have to prove you have a certain level of injury to be able to sue. You have to have a quote-unquote serious injury under New York law, and it has special magic definitions. However, if you're on a motorcycle or an e-bike that technically qualifies as a motorcycle, or a scooter that technically qualifies as a motorcycle, you don't have to prove any level of injury to sue. You can sue for whatever injury you have, even if it wouldn't otherwise meet the serious injury definition under New York law. Why? Because you're not getting no fault.
Okay. And do you have why is it different between if you have a person in the car versus if you're delivering food? Why is I think Uber is such a great example because it has both Uber and Uber Eats. Why is there a difference? Do you know?
The difference is that New York's legislature just drew a certain line. And when Uber kind of came out, they wanted everybody who was quote unquote an Uber driver to have to basically deal with the same administrative requirements and have the same insurance requirements as taxi cabs.
It's cabs.
Yeah. So I think it was a little bit of a protectionist issue to try and protect the the taxi cab industry from unfair competition. So under the livery laws, all of Uber's drivers that transport people are considered employees, and they have to have certain mandatory insurance requirements or meet certain mandatory minimum insurance requirements, which includes workers' compensation benefits.
Okay. I could see evening the playing field there, just because I remember when Uber first came out, I was living in Chicago, and cab drivers did not like it. They did not like it at all.
It's competition. And, at one point in time in New York, medallions were very expensive. It cost a lot to buy a medallion, to buy the right to have a cab. Now, all of a sudden, everybody and their brother can become an Uber driver without having to go through those same requirements. So, yeah, there was definitely a lot of opposition to Uber and Rideshares in New York from the taxi drivers.
Yeah, for sure. Same in Chicago. Yeah. So what happens if you're in an Uber and you get into an accident and the other driver doesn't have any insurance?
Well, New York law actually has mandatory protections for that. And it's not uncommon, unfortunately, nowadays to get hit by somebody without insurance.
Right.
So in every policy in New York, there's a mandatory endorsement for something called either uninsured motorist or supplemental underinsured motorist. And basically what that means is that the vehicle that you're in has to provide the minimum standards of insurance in case you get hit by a vehicle that has no insurance. Mm-hmm. So for example, if you get hit by another vehicle, every vehicle that actually has insurance in New York has to provide a minimum of $25,000 in coverage in case you get hit by another vehicle that doesn't have insurance or is stolen or is being used without authorization. So there's always that protection there. Now, if for example, you get hit by a car and they have minimal insurance, like they have $25,000, but you're in a vehicle like an Uber that has a higher limit, or you under your own personal policy have a higher limit of insurance. Say you have $100,000 in what's called supplemental underinsured motorists, or SUM. Then what happens is you can take the policy of the person who hit you with the $25,000 and look to your own policy for the difference in coverage that you have between the tortfeasor and your own policy. So for example, just an easy example, if you're in an Uber and let's say hypothetically, the Uber has $100,000 in supplemental underinsured motorist coverage, right? And you get hit by somebody who has $25,000 and they cause very serious injuries. You can accept the $25,000 in insurance from the car that hit you, and then look to the Uber's insurance for the supplement for the $75,000 or the difference between what that person had and the coverage of the vehicle you're in.
Okay, that makes sense. So tell me this: if there's anybody listening who is, a rideshare or a food delivery person, and they get into an accident, at what point should they call someone like you?
Well, the first thing you want to do is, I think, get an accident report, because that's going to have all the information you need. The second thing, obviously, is if you're hurt, go to the hospital, go to a doctor, get treated. But I think you want to speak to a experienced rideshare accident attorney in New York sooner rather than later, because at least within a week or first 2 weeks. Why? Because there's applications that have to be submitted. There's no-fault applications that may have to be done. And if you sit on your hands, if you wait for more than 30 days, you may lose out on your benefits. You either may not be able to get medical treatment that you need, or you may get stuck with medical bills because you didn't do the right paperwork. And that's not a circumstance anyone wants to be in, especially if you're injured in, for example, an Uber, and you don't know who the person is, you don't know who the driver is. You really need an experienced accident attorney as soon as possible to get the police report. A lot of times we have investigators that are former detectives. We send them down to the precinct. We have the online resources where we can pull accident reports after about a week from the DMV, New York's Department of Motor Vehicle website, and we can download the accident reports in our office. So our experience really makes a big difference, and taking the appropriate steps to protect yourself early on can really make a big difference later on, because you don't want to get stuck with medical bills. Why would you?
As always, just don't delay. Don't delay. That seems to be a lot of the tips that we give here. So, well, thank you for joining us on Trial Talk with experienced attorney Michael Joseph. To connect with Michael, visit NewYorkTrialLawyers.org. And of course, be sure to like and subscribe our channel and leave us a review in the comments. Michael, great to hear from you, and looking forward to the next one.
Very good. Thanks.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.